Hello, my name is Ce2 Lee, and before we start our discussion, let me start with a bunch of questions. Well, please raise your hand if you have encountered any people with autism in Korean Japan in the middle school or high school classroom. Well, almost all of you seems to have encountered autism in school. Well, can you please raise your hand once again? Well, can I ask you some questions? Well, yes. What do you think that person was like the most different from other people who doesn't have autism? Like, was it the knowledge, literacy, or like social ability to communicate with others?
Maybe social ability.
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, autism is diagnosed by how a man screws up the social interaction. Not that he's knowledgeable or illiterate. Well, it would be very harsh to say to people who fails math tests like mentally disorder. Well, it's a very sad condition, but it is not like a mental disorder. Well, we don't go to mental hospital if we get C in the math score, doesn't it? Well, illiteracy is also not the condition of the autism. Niels Bohr, a famous scientist who invented the atom model that was so great that he got it named after him, the Bohr model, was illiterate. Well, you would also be surprised to hear that Tom Cruise, the worldwide actor in the world, is also illiterate. No one thinks of Tom Cruise as mentally disordered, doesn't it? Then why it seems to us that autism is often related to mentally disorder? Let me rephrase. Why do you think that knowledge and literacy is often related to autism? Well, that's because of the stereotypes that are born to us by the media. Well, let me take you an example. Here's Justin, a 13-year-old boy who has difficulty in talking. He's not verbal. I mean, he does not communicate by words. He uses iPad and by touching his image to talk and communicate his ideas and concerns. When he gets angry, he starts walking on the floor. And eventually, when he gets more angry, he like stomps and hits his head until he gets stitches. Well, this is a typical stereotype of the autism. Well, on the other hand, let me give you another example that are also diagnosed as the autism. Here's Gabriel. Gabriel is a 13-year-old boy who's actually quiet but very knowledgeable. He's very intelligent. He knows almost everything about mathematics. He does like 3 number to 3 number multiply. But yet, when it comes to communication, he doesn't know how to speak. He doesn't know how to start the conversation, when to interfere when there is already a conversation, and his words are very awkward. Yet, we all, when in the real life, think that Justin is a person with autism, whereas Gabriel, who is also in another example of the autism, is just a quiet, shy boy, but very knowledgeable. Well, nowadays autism is almost everywhere. Well, to be honest, I was also having an autism still, and still I am having difficulty with biting. Well, I am an autism patient who are diagnosed as the Asperger syndrome. Well, no one in this class would know it because it is very scientific term, and I was very surprised to when I got in SNU University. I was very surprised to see in my colleague, academical colleagues, there was another two of them who had the similar, but they were not Asperger, but similar autism as I have encountered. Well, now it is common. Well, my department has almost 90 people, so 3 of them is normal. Well, let's look at it why 30 versus 1 is the normal statistics. According to the government survey and Autism Speaks Committee, there's a 1 in every 45 children nowadays in United States is diagnosed as autism. Well, how about in Korea? When Autism Speaks Committee in United States conducted a research in United States to see how much autism are in our school, they were surprised to find out that 1 out of every 37 children in South Korea is currently having a sign of autism. The more surprising fact is that 2/3 of their students are in mainstream school. They are not diagnosed as Asperger or autism, whatever, before, and they do not get any of the treatments. Well, there would be some kind of people who would have difficulty in blending with peers, as if I thought I did. But however, most of them gets unnoticed. As I had example of the Gabriel, a quiet boy who does not talk but is good at mathematics. Then, how can we help to cure people with autism? Well, helping people with autism should be different from us usually helping people with mental or physically illness. We doesn't need to make people with autism comfortable or make them soothing about ordinary life. We should educate them into social being. We should educate them how to act socially, how to interfere between talks and talks, how to make to start talking like anybody else. Well, some of you might say to me that is autism not curable? Yes, it is partially true. There's large spectrum of autism disorder from one who is very low at IQ, doesn't know how to be educated, so they are very hard to educate though, but however, there are also another kind of people with autism who are good at knowledge, who does mathematics and other subjects in schools well, not communicatable, doesn't know how to communicate. What we need to focus is that autism does not have only low IQ or not educatable people, but also people who are high in IQ and are ready to learn how to communicate, to blend with peers. So this is from my personal advice. Please keep this in mind And if you have another ability to encounter kids who have autism, or like when you go to when you become parents and encounter your child as autism, please handle those three categories that today I will talk about. First, take every step with students at his age. This was the meaning. This meaning should be a bit like puzzling to you to explain it. I mean, if the student is not having autism and he does not communicate with his peers and he is not blending in their peers, but he is knowledgeable, parents often mistake their child into going to schools early by taking some exams that excludes the middle school life, such as 검정고시. But however, it's a very dangerous choice. People with autism should take their classes. They should see how their peers act socially and try to blend in with them with some trials and errors. Without these steps and just going into like science school or high school, even though they are at the age of middle school, just makes matters worse because they doesn't know how to communicate with peers. They only like experience brotherhood and like what do I mean? Well, what I want to mean is that this communication would be different from peer to peer or brother to me on the communication. Well, let me take an example. Well, while I was at middle school, I had a kid who was similar to me, but he was very knowledgeable in math and science. So when he was in second grade on the middle school, he had the ability to go into the high school, actually science high school. However, because he wasn't able to communicate at ease with his brothers or sisters, he had failure on the science high school also, although he had the ability to understand all the subjects on the school, and I don't know whether he still goes to high school. I heard that he had failed to graduate. This would be a very sad and radical example, but why I take this example is because this is usually what happens to people with autism who gets into the high school without having adequate middle school life. Well, second, point out the behavior that he or she needs to be fixed. Well, often you will be distracted by the actions that are caused by people who have mental illness. However, when it comes to autism, that people who have autism also wants to fix their behavior that differentiates him with other people, but why he doesn't do so is just because he doesn't know how to. So prior to getting distracted by behaviors by the people with autism, please point out to them what is the problem. Just as you feedback to others, what is the problem of your conversation or else. And third, if you have decided willingly to take those 2 steps, please take distance. Well, I mean, taking distance is important because when you get intimacy, you get a compassion about those with autism and goes very closer. you lose the ability for the people with autism to fix their behavior, because taking no distance equals like allowing their performance. It means they will not try to listen to your advice. Otherwise, they will only want to understand you why you does that behavior. Well, although it might look to you that it is very hard for you to like fix the person's behavior throughout the year, well, that's a very dreadful task, isn't it? If it comes to mind that you don't want to like try to do those, please keep in mind your little behavior will make change to his persons throughout life. What seems to be a tedious job will make a humongous change to that person's throughout life, like mine. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Questions, comments? I feel like the number of people with Asperger's or people who are on the spectrum might be higher than normal at SNU. You said you have 3 in your department, which is actually the national average, but I feel like sometimes, for example, when I'm talking to individual students, not just sometimes, quite often, there are students that avoid eye contact with me or shake a little bit when I talk to them. And I feel like that's quite common.
Deciding the mental illness is very dangerous behavior, because being nervous or like being very active can be confused to having a mental illness like autism or Asperger. Well, it needs to be seriously diagnosed by the psychologist or the mental therapist, because parents nowadays often like have difficulty in identifying whether the child is very active, so he needs some support, or he is mentally ill. So, yes, that should be.
So it could be it could be severe introversion,
yes.
For example. What about empathy and autistic spectrum disorders? Like, when I was a child, I remember there being some naughty children, and I remember there being some, like, there were some naughty children, and then mostly there were normal children of different levels of intelligence, but I don't remember any autistic children, or what we would call autistic now. And I don't remember any children who were not empathic, who didn't have empathy. Do you know what empathy means?
Yes.
But right now, my child is growing up among many children that don't have any empathy. So, for example, when it comes to sharing a toy, like some of those children say, no! Or like, when my son says hi, they just don't say anything. And to me, that is not the kind of behavior that my peers had when I was a child. So I feel like my son is growing up among people who are a little bit unusual, to say the least. Is there any relationship with autistic spectrum disorder and lack of empathy, or not saying hello to people, or, could that be related?
Well, that's a very hard question, because empathy, on my personal experience, can be educated by the parents. But when hearing your talks, I think that nowadays we seriously lack the education of empathy to others. That's the first reason why people will not take empathy with others. Well, the real people, being naughty, I think, would be knowing what empathy is, but using it, on the wrong side, on my decision. But and when it comes to what is autistic exactly? Can you explain it in more detail?
I probably don't have a clinical definition, but my understanding of autistic spectrum disorder is that people with autism have trouble recognizing emotions in other people.
Yes.
And have trouble expressing themselves to other people.
Yes. Well, autism different from people who are not empathetic is that people with autism wants to communicate with others. So because they doesn't know how to show empathy to others, they have difficulty in catching the message of the others.
Which sometimes makes them more reluctant to communicate because communicating can be awkward.
Yes.
Right. So I wonder if there's a increase in sociopathy or psychopathy. Maybe some of these children, like for example, my son's cousin doesn't seem to have any empathy for other people, which I think is a little bit pathological. Like, I feel like there might be some mental issue, but it could just be personality type as well, right?
Yes, nowadays many people's personality is shifting from very providing to peers to self-reluctant. And in this time we also need to does not confuse mental illness with selflessness, selfishness. Well, if he or she has autism and does not have empathy, what he will do is if you doesn't say any word, he will not recognize your cue and does not do anything. Whereas when you say something, please give me something, then he will willingly give you something. So the problem is, today's selfish children have knowledge in the verbal or non-verbal cues of the children, but people with autism does not have knowledge of how to catch the verbal and non-verbal cues. And if that people is autism, there will be another behavior such as repeating some behaviors. Well, it is different from tic 장애. It's like a man who keeps kicking the floor even though the teacher doesn't say so. Such as these.
I have a question. So when I was in middle school, there was a class for students who have that autism. When I was first grade, they had their class just by themselves, in a separate classroom. But when I was second grade, they took a class with us together in the same classroom, and actually they got bullied a lot by the other normal students. So we think, which one is better, taking a class with other normal students or taking a class just on their own with the other autism students?
Well, it depends on the people's situation. Well, was the person who was bullying was able to communicate with others?
They could communicate, but it was a little bit awkward.
You mean his talking pronunciation was a bit?
But there was nothing wrong with his pronunciation, but how can I explain it? He was kind of lacking social ability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Well, I was also bullied a lot in school, but every time I was bullied, I had one or two students who said, please don't do something. Please don't do like this or this or this. Well, even though it is very comfortable for people with autism to getting people with autism together, it is also important for them to blend in ordinary classroom Also, they get bullied. I think it is better to like understand what ordinary people act.
But it might like discourage them to get mingled into normal society, like that experience with the bullies. Yeah.
That's also a problem of that. But my experience was that as we go to elementary to middle school and middle school to high school, we can significantly change the behavior. So, and the people who bullied like would be separated from our school, so they would get small in amount, eventually making me acceptable in society.
Okay, I'm sure people have got more questions they'd like to ask, but we have to move on.